to the Pledge of Allegiance. If you all please rise and the flag to my right. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States. I would like to thank the audience for participating in tonight's meeting. You're welcome. First of all, I want our secretary to call the roll, please. I'm sorry.
John Herman,
Here.
Amos Brissette,
Here.
trustee Kevin Martin,
Here.
John Haas,
Present.
Aaron Fellers,
Present.
Jeffrey Dar,
Here.
Charles LaRock,
Absolutely excused.
Brian Cullen.
He is in the audience and not sitting tonight as the.
Oh, thank you. Oh,
He
Thank you.
is the alternate.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a quorum. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. The minutes of December 13th. The chair is open for a motion if there's no discussion.
I make a motion that we accept the minutes from December 13th, 2022.
I would second that, but I have some corrections coming.
Mr. Chair, I also have a correction I'd like to bring up with regard to the meeting. If I may.
Yeah, go ahead. You got the floor.
In the meeting minutes of the last meeting, I believe Commissioner Atchison was indeed present, and like Commissioner Cullen this evening, she was present and in the audience. She did not be counted as absent, excused, she was present, and her vote should be not counted as absent. They should simply
Thank you.
not be counted. And I would also, as a second point, I don't believe that Director Akers was present. I believe that was Director Powers was present. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yes, at the December 13th meeting, yes.
I think it says that staff was Ron Akers, not Director Powers.
That's what I get for copy paste.
Those are the only corrections that I
Thank
have.
you.
Thank you, sir.
That brings me to me. On the second to the last page. I'm waiting for you to catch up.
I'm here.
About the third paragraph from the top of the page. It says Sellers motion, I seconded to accept the agenda as president. That doesn't belong there. Anybody else have any corrections or comments?
Through the,
Motion is in order to accept as amended. Motion by Amos Grissom,
Support.
support by Mr. Jar. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. The motion carried.
through the chair.
Yes,
First of all, okay, I think our microphones are working. Just a housekeeping item for tonight. If everybody who's speaking, if you are here to speak during the public hearing, if you could speak really close to the microphone, that helps us to pick it up and it will be recorded more soundly. And I did have an item or two potentially regarding the approval of the agenda, which we would require to revisit that item if you would like to entertain the discussion on that.
okay. We have an agenda in front of us and we'd like to make some changes to the format. First of all, the first thing on the agenda item should be election of officer for 2023. And then in the comment section on the end of the meeting, on the announcement comments, etc., I'd like you to add training. This is for our board members for training, and we don't need to do that in public per se, so I want that after the agenda. Any other corrections?
The only other correction is a preferential item because of the large volume of attendees tonight. The board may contemplate rearranging the order of the new business items being discussed. I believe that there's three new business items on the agenda, as well as 3 public hearings related to those. If there's a significant volume of people here potentially for the 3rd item, it may make sense to move that up in the agenda to either the 1st or 2nd, if the board is amenable to that in terms of
Yeah, I would agree with that. Are the 3 applicants in the audience today? Do we have a problem with the agenda as is, or do you want to change it, or do you prefer all? Yeah, come to the microphone, please.
Tyler Edwards with Menards. I know all these folks are gonna be speaking not on my item. I would prefer to go first so I can catch my flight home as they are waiting for me.
That's what I thought you were about to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we can do that if the board agrees to that. We'll change that as well. We'll put the narrative as number 1. Is implied.
so.
And then, do we want to do the lake property second, and then mine is 3rd, or which order do we want to go?
You might,
I believe the late discussion is gonna be probably rather lengthy, I think that. Well, that's.
and if that is the direction of the board, that's the order of the current agenda as is, so the sequence would not change. So you can keep that along if that's the preference. We'll leave that up to the board.
So the lakeside will be the last item on the agenda. Okay. All right. So motion is in order for amendment agenda.
Mr. Chair, the election of officers is to happen before the public hearing. I'm afraid I don't have the election of officers on the agenda before me. Is that before public hearing or after?
Before the public hearing.
So, through the chair, if I may, it is actually listed as the first new business item on the agenda. I believe the idea would be to move it before the public hearing items on the agenda, if that's something the board is open to.
Want to do it? What is your preference?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I move to accept this agenda with the item for election of officers take place between correspondence and public hearing.
Believe the word is second the motion.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Vote likewise. Motion carried. We have an agenda. All right, before we get into the public hearings, I have some rules for the audience that we need to adhere to, and to give you some guidance on the audience works, okay? Each speaker has 3 minutes at the podium, so that everybody can hear us. We're on Zoom and we're on, YouTube, I believe, so we need people to speak into the microphone. You get 1 appearance at the microphone during the public hearing. All comments will be addressed to this chair. No personal attacks or foul language will be allowed. Be courteous to each other. No comments from the audience. You may speak only from the podium where you are recognized by the chair. Now speak to the applicant, address your comments to the chair. And if there's a spokesperson for a group, we will allow more time for them to speak. But other than that, it's a 3-minute limit. And after that, the BZA will discuss on what is heard from the public during the public comment of the agenda. And if there's anything, anyone in the Board of Zoning Appeal that have a conflict of interest in either of the 3 cases before us today, they should recuse themselves. It is the responsibility of the BZA to uphold the requirements of the zoning ordinance, except in unusual circumstances related to the condition of the property. So those are the basic guidelines that we follow, and we hope that you will adhere to that. Having said that, we have the first public hearing. And that is,
Through the chair,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I believe we can move ahead with the election of officers prior to the public hearings, if that's amenable.
That was the motion. Yeah, right after correspondence, right before public
All
hearings.
right, okay, well, on election of officers. What's your pleasure, folks?
I would make a motion to maintain our present chair.
The motion, seconded. Any discussion?
I would ask you if vice chairperson is willing to continue in that role, if the chairperson is willing to continue in that role, if the secretary is willing to continue in that role as an acceptance of the nomination.
Yes, for me?
Yes. Okay.
And that's a yes.
Okay,
Okay.
so any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Nominations closed. Roll call vote? Please.
John Herman,
Yes.
Amos Grisette,
Yes.
trustee Kevin Martin,
Yes.
John Haas,
Yes.
Aaron Spellers,
Yes.
and Jeffrey Dart.
Yes.
Okay, we have unanimous election of the board. To be continued. Thank you. All right, public hearings. Case number 1. Number 22-042. Tyler Edwards on behalf of Menards. Located at 10,010 Belleville Road, parcel number ID is 83-061-99005-726, zone C2, extensive highway business district. The request is by Tyler Edwards on behalf of Menards to seek to install an addition of existing accessory canopy, which is attached to the principal building to within 15 feet of the side lot line. The project is proposed to be located on the Belleville Road, located on the west side of Belleville Road between West Circle and Tyler Road. The site has a tax parcel ID. I read that previously in the record. And it is zone C2, extensive highway district. This is contrary to the requirements of section 3.12 E of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance as described below. The required side yard setback is 25 feet. Existing side yard back is 35 feet. Proposed side yard back setback is 15 feet. The variance requested of 10 feet. Motion to open the public hearing.
Move to open the public hearing, sir.
Second. Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call vote? Yeah, no? No, okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed likewise? Motion carried. If there's any public comment, please approach the podium from the public.
And through the chair,
Yes,
just to reiterate, this is just specific to the Menards side yard setback variance request. And I will just at this point take an opportunity to note the public is able to participate remotely via Zoom as well as in person. We prefer, of course, our board members have to be here in person. Applicants, we recommend strongly that they're here in person, but members of the public, of course, can be remotely viewing. Tonight's meeting is on Zoom and it will be published to YouTube. It's not currently live on YouTube, but there is a live Zoom link available to folks who are watching that way. So I see that we have 7 participants in Zoom. To those participants, if you are interested in speaking on any of the 3 variance items tonight, at the time when the public comment is solicited, you can either raise your virtual hand, type in the chat, or dial *9 to make comments. So that's an open invitation to anybody on Zoom who would like to speak to the Menards case. But of course, if there's anybody in the room as well, please feel free to step up to the podium.
We have no public comment in the room here.
All right, and with our participants on Zoom, I do not see any virtual hands raised and no comments in the chat, so it does not look like there's any commentary. You'll hear more from the applicant and myself during the new business item, and Ms. Christian during the new business item, but there's no other comment on this at this time.
I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Support.
Motion and supported. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. The motion carried. Public hearing closed. Case number 2. Bezo Construction on behalf of Meyer Incorporated. Location 9701 Belleville Road. Parcel number ID is 83-058-99-006-710 and is zone C2 Extensive Highway Business District. The request is from Bezo Construction on behalf of Meyer for the 9701 Belleville Road parcel number listed before, requested to install a combined total wall sign area of 628.77 square feet. The site is zoned as C2 Extensive Highway Business District. This is contrary to the section 11.0108B sign regulations applicable to the C1 and C2 and the FS districts as described below. Allowable maximum wall sign area is 3 square feet per linear front foot of the building frontage, not to exceed 300 square feet per business or 50% of the facade inclusive of windows and doors opening. Existing total wall sign area of the Meyer store and gasoline station is 266.07 square feet. Proposed wall sign area of Meyer stores and the gas station is 628.77 square feet, requiring a variance of 328.77 square feet. Open public hearing, but a motion to open.
Mr. Chair, I move to open the public hearing.
Second Jar, Mr. Haas. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise, motion carried. We have a public hearing. This time I open it up to the audience to see if anybody has any comments on this. And if you do, please come to the podium. Seeing none,
And anybody in the virtual chat, any virtual attendees? I don't see any comments in the chat or hands raised. So I believe there's no further comment.
seeing none on the Zoom meeting. So there's no public comment. Motion to close the public hearing is in order.
Motion to close the public hearing, sir.
Support.
Motion by Haas, a motion by Jar, supported by Haas. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. The motion carried. Public hearing is closed. Case number 2. Tyler Evans on behalf of Menards. Sorry.
Can I propose a procedural?
Yes.
Change? Do you think that we could, review these first 2 cases, before we go ahead and read through the 3rd case?
I don't see.
Through the chair, maybe more advisable to keep the public hearing items on the front end of the agenda. Typically, that's the way the Board of Zoning Appeals meetings are set up, and it may be backed by the bylaws. I don't have those quite memorized in that regard, but typically you'll have the public hearing items first. So you'll just take comment and we'll go through our staff reports on all three items at a later part of the agenda, typically. Fair question.
Okay, we have a clarification on that. All right, case number 3, 22-056, the Belleville Yacht Club. The location is a Township Lake property adjacent to 831 East Huron River Drive. Parcel number, ID number is 83-8899000500. It's zoned as Belleville Lake Shoreline District B, non-single family residential BLB, adjacent property at 831 East Huron River Drive is zoned as R1C, single family residential district. The request is for an exception, modification, or appeal by Belleville Yacht Club to install a 2 dock structures, each with a length not to exceed 120 feet. Subject to approval by the state of Michigan. In contrast to the requirements of section 3.120D-5 of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance, which limits the dock length to 40 feet into Belleville Lake. Measured perpendicularly from the front of the shoreline, unless greater length is necessary to reach the water with a depth of 3 feet. The subject site is a Township Lake property adjacent to 831 East Huron River Drive, and I've listed our parcel number in the record on the north side of East Huron River Drive between Loza Lane and Evelyn Court. The site is zoned Belleville Lake Shoreline District B, non-single family residential. The request will be reviewed by the BZA for the requirements of section 3120F, number 7 of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. Motion for the public hearing. Motion by Ames Graham. Support. Seconded by Mr. Sellers. Any discussion on the opening of the public hearing? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. We have a public hearing. Anybody from the public, not representing, Belleville Yacht Club would like to speak on this subject, please approach the podium. Yes, sir. Would you please state your name and address?
Good evening. Yes, my name is Michael Clary. I live at 48380 West Huron River Drive. I have lived there for almost 40 years. I got the notice that there was a request for a variance on the extension of the dock for the BYC. Questions I had was, number one, that is a private company or a private entity, is it not?
Yes, it is.
So that what they're requesting is a private dock, is it not? Not to be used by the public.
There's through the chair.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sure the applicant can speak to that during their presentation, but it's an institutional use that is, has membership, so it is technically not a public use.
Okay, answer that question. Okay, the only other time I've ever been in this situation was when Menards wanted to be built to begin with. Is there going to be a presentation that kind of shows a drawing and measurements, distance from shore to shore? Because it seems to me 120 feet is awful long extension, especially at that point of the lake there, being close to the launch and being in a highly traffic area and a pretty rough water area, to be honest with you. Like I said, I've been here about 40 years, so there's some concerns there, and there wasn't much in the notification other than they were asking for a variance, and there was no other knowledge for anybody to to be able to make any kind of decision one way or the other, or feeling one way or the other, so. That's kind of why I came here, is to see exactly what, number one, you answered the question, it's private. That's an awful long way to go out, and the fact that the public won't be able to have access to it. And I would like to see some kind of drawing. Is there a presentation to be made?
There is a presentation to be made, and we'll have the applicant address that concern.
Okay,
Is that fair enough?
awesome, thank you, God bless,
You're welcome.
appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, and I'm sorry to keep interjecting, but just as a point of reference, I could put the site plan up just on the overhead for people to have a point of reference as they make comment.
Yeah.
Speak to the- There's a good point. There's one large.
Yeah, we have
print
one on
the
there.
board as well. Yep.
Anybody interested? Please don't disrupt the meeting, but meeting was overhead for you to look at.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Could also make a suggestion that these public hearings are meant for collecting comment. They really aren't meant to be back and forth question and answer. Normally in a public hearing, the format is to make your comment and pose your question, so that when the applicant makes their presentation and when staff makes their presentation, they would have a chance to answer the questions, rather than have it be a back and forth between parties who haven't had a chance to give their presentation yet. If I could
thank you
make
for the
this
clarification.
suggestion.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other public comment? Yes, we have. Please state your name and your address, please, for the record.
Hi, Corey Gibson, 43160 East Huron River Drive. Yes, my concerns are, the BYC and its representatives has shown this board, lake owners, taxpayers in the past, that they don't seem to have any regard for rules or ordinances. Some of the examples are the current dock situation that they're in, that is currently not complete, which is a lake hazard. And not to forget the dwelling they added on the edge of the property years ago that they refer to as the Tiki Bar, which was not permitted and zoned until after the fact. So I said, along with that, my concerns are that this variance they're asking for in the waterway would reduce the space approximately to 525 feet of boat travel. When you take into consideration the 40-foot allowed on the north shore plus 100-foot no wake zone, the ask of 120 feet of dock space plus 100-foot wake zone would narrow that to approximately 525 feet, which is pretty narrow way for the busiest area of the lake. I also note that previously in conversations about years ago about putting docks in at the BYC, the proposal was 140 feet with buoys at 100 feet, which would throw the no wake zone out another 100 feet, which is why I bring that up. So if we were to ask later if the BYC were to ask later for buoys to go out from a DNR request, that would narrow the pathway even further. So I'm not a fan of this request. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment.
My name is Barbara Miller, and I live at 45311 Harmony Lane, and I have several comments to make. First of all, I object to the packet that was sent out that the pages aren't numbered. It's very easy to flip them and mix them up, and I'm not the only one. I heard other people in the audience making the same comment. So the pages should be numbered. In my reading of the presentation, I did not see the number of boats that would be allowed on this 120 feet times 2, plus the 4 extensions. There are 4 extensions, sub docks or something. So how many boats? There is language in the presentation that the public has where it says that this use or this exception is precedent setting. But then it says later in the same paragraph, this development is unlikely to be replicated. That is an inconsistency within the presentation, and I would like that explained. And Another point in the presentation, it says this is a service to the community. This development of the docks is a service to the community, but it's only for BYC members. And so I'd like to know how it is a service to the community, particularly when there are no women allowed in that club. So 50% of the community is out anyway. And another point is that it's the presentation, the explanation says there will be a reasonable use by the community will be allowed. If it's a private club for members only, what is the reasonable use anticipated? Further, there will not be allowed dry docks or storage will not occur. I think that's kind of vague. Will not occur should be stated more firmly, more clearly. Dry docks or storage will not be permitted. Would be clearer than will not occur. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Thank you for your comments. Do we have any comments on the Zoom?
We do, and I will also summarize some correspondences that I've passed out this evening. So I might, if I could, Mr. Chair, just summarize some of the written correspondences that we've gotten.
Please do.
Which will be added to the record of the meeting as well, because I will just summarize them. I won't read them verbatim. But we did receive a correspondence from Michelle Montour of 43200 East Huron River Drive with concerns regarding the Belleville Lake is narrow, especially in this area. Extending a dock past the Van Buren Township ordinance is potentially hazardous to boaters and jet skiers. That the boat launch is adjacent to these docks. Boats and jet skiers take off from the launch, and extending the dock is dangerous. And that there are many people that launch their boats or jet skis are not seasoned, and this extension would be unsafe. Then the last comment pertains to if these docks are approved, will that give other people the option to extend their docks? So that's paraphrasing the correspondence from 43200 East Huron River Drive. We also have a couple of correspondences from Mr. Riggs, Jeffrey Riggs, who is also attending remotely this evening. But there are comments regarding there's a picture of the current condition that was taken that he sent to be dispersed, and a concern that the loss of usable space for boats is evident. There are a few questions that were also provided in his correspondence, that one pertaining to the potential conflict of interest issue, which I know the chair mentioned conflict of interest for any of the cases tonight. Just as a point of context, it's not something that was in the letter. There's a comment that the drawing shows a 762 foot to opposite shoreline dimension in the staff letter, which causes concern due to the no wake zone. The letter also contains that there's a lake traffic study is needed for this, and that the BYC drawings were only submitted to the township on December 21st, published December 22nd. And the comment there is about the holidays and people being on vacation and not knowing about the meeting during the holidays. And then also a comment about consulting the Wayne County Marine Patrol on their thoughts of making the navigational channels smaller in this area, and some other comments. You'll see those written, and again, those will be included with the record of the meeting. There's also a letter that was previously sent just as another point of reference for this case. The applicant had preliminarily explored a potential text amendment to the zoning ordinance to review this issue. There is some analysis from Mr. Howley regarding the thought on that, and his correspondence is attached for your reference as well. It speaks to some of the items pertaining to the an ordinance being a general adjustment and a variance or an exception being a more specific adjustment and maybe more appropriate. So those are the summaries of the written correspondences that we have that will be available. And I also see Mr. Riggs has his hand raised. So if the chair will allow, I will bring him into the chat, okay?
Okay, am I here?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, very good. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, thank you very much for your time on this. Dan summarized some of the things I sent in. So I'll just briefly go over and emphasize the portions that are what I feel are most important. As mentioned, I used the drawing that was in the BBT planning meeting packet that said 762 feet to the opposite shoreline in that area. Minus 100 feet of no wake is what I added in, which is off of the 120 feet. Minus 100 feet of no wake on the north shoreline, minus 40 feet. That goes back to what Corey was mentioning. I came up with 522 feet using the numbers that were put in the BBT meeting packet. Too narrow for such a busy lake area. Keeping in mind, we have had a lot of increase in boat traffic, especially in the past couple of years, and especially with jet skis, which have been a big issue with some of the speeding around the lakes and getting close to things, that type of thing. We narrow this down, it's going to make it even worse, in my opinion. As mentioned, I think a lake traffic study is needed for this. I'm trying to propose and pass this during January, having it proposed early December, the 21st of December, so that people on vacation like I'm talking to you from Key Largo, and trying to get this understood without being there, seeing what's happening is an issue. I think we need the lake traffic study. I think we need to have not only the Wayne County Marine Patrol get their thoughts on this regarding the navigational channels getting smaller, but also, of course, Van Buren Marine Patrol. There are safety hazards of docks extending out 4 times the average length and 3 times what the code is right now. So I believe that is very important, especially with the possibility that this could set up a other areas to start creating docks going out, whether it be Johnny's, whether it be new kayak rental facilities, whether it be, I don't know, what was it, 9 or 10 different facilities that were listed in the BBT packet that said these are comparable facilities. Well, what if all those comparable facilities said, hey, you used us as an example, as a comparable, we also want 120 feet. Now Belleville Lake becomes a no wake zone lake, which doesn't do anybody good, not only the lakefront owners, the non-BUIC lakefront owners, but also the people that come in from outside the communities. And I believe this is an issue that we need to look far more seriously at than just a few drawings and say, let us go out 120 feet. And let me see here. The conflict of interest, yeah, certainly is of concern. Mrs. Atchison is, her husband is a BYC member, and she is very active in the BYC. That is a clear conflict of interest on her part. I don't know who else is a member or very close with the BYC. They're a great organization, and there's a lot of people very active with them. We need to consider that before we make this decision. And I guess lastly, what does this benefit? Basically, it benefits the BYC, in my opinion. Now, granted, they do a lot of things for the community, but that's not their full-time job. Most of their time is spent for BYC people enjoying their own facility. And I think the safety hazard of this, because it's not something down by Sandy's Marina at the end of the lake, this is right in the middle of the lake. There you go. Those are my comments, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else?
Mr. Chair, I do not see any other comments in the chat or any other hands raised at this time. So anybody on the Zoom, if you have any additional comments on this request, please raise your virtual hand or type something in the chat. We'll be sure to mention it. Okay, that does not appear to be happening, so there are no further comments.
Last call for the audience. Anybody else have a public comment? Seeing none, motion to close the public hearing in the way.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Dar, seconded by Hahn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion carried. Public hearing number 3 is closed. And we move on to the new business portion of the agenda. Menards first?
Menards.
Yeah, okay. Okay, this is for the Menards property. Parcel number 83-061-99-005-726. Zone Z2, Extensive Highway District. Mr. Edwards, on behalf of Menards, is seeking to install an addition to an existing accessory canopy, which is to be attached to the main building, to within 15 feet of the site lot line. The project is proposed to be located at 001-010 Belver Road, located on the west side of Belver Road between Westlake Circle and Tyler Road. And this is contrary to the requirements of section 3.112E of the Van Buren zoning ordinance as described below. Required setback is 25 feet. Existing side yard setback is 35 feet. Proposed side yard setback is 15 feet. The variance requested is 10 feet. Presentation by the staff, please.
And through the chair, I will defer staff comments at this point to Vidya Krishnan, who wrote a thorough report on the request from the standpoint of the criteria for practical difficulty and the variance standards of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. I would just add that there is a model motion that the BZA may use if they so choose to go through their own findings on those after the applicant and our staff have made their comments and we hear everything about the case tonight. So there's a model motion that allows you to go through those findings. But with that, I'll turn this over to Ms. Krishnan.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Director Powell, members of the board. As the chairman summarized, the request before you tonight is from Menards for a side yard setback variance. The site is located on the west side of Belleville Road, and the request for variance relates to the north side yard, where the required setback is 25 feet and the proposed setback by the applicant is 15 feet, resulting in a variance request of 10 feet. The zoning ordinance has specific standards based upon which the board has to make a determination on whether a variance meets the standards for approval or not, and I shall summarize those for you. The first one is strict compliance with the ordinance standards would unnecessarily prevent the applicant from using the property for a permitted use or would render compliance with the ordinance unnecessarily burdensome. Now, in the C2 district, as I mentioned, the minimum side yard setback is 25 feet. If you look at the north side of the store, it has got an existing canopy structure to which the setback is measured, and that canopy structure is at the 35-foot setback. Now, the ordinance also requires properties in the C2 district to provide a 20-foot wide green belt along their side property lines. At the time Menards was originally approved, the Planning Commission granted a deviation to reduce the green belt width from 20 feet to 10 feet. So what they have at this time is a 10-foot wide setback, which abuts a 25-foot wide paved area. Now, the applicant's proposal is to cover 20 feet of this paved area to create a third lane, which will provide access to the rear lot at Menards. Now, the applicant's justification in requesting the variance is that changing market conditions over the past few years has increased the focus on online orders and pickup, rather than the traditional mode of going into a store and shopping for your products. Now, there are two existing lanes already on the north side, both of which are manned by a guard, so you basically have to check in and check out. The applicant's proposal is to install a third additional lane so that somebody who has done an online purchase can just drive up to a kiosk, scan in their electronic receipt and gain access to the rear portion of the parcel without having to go through the guard. Now, the applicant appeared before the planning commission at their December meeting to seek feedback, which is required for all projects which need to go back before the planning commission. So the planning commission asked the applicant questions about why a third lane is required. And the applicant stated the intent of the addition is to help customers save, I quote, a few minutes of their time by using an automated lane instead of a manned lane. The planning commission also asked why couldn't it just have an automatic kiosk in the third lane without the overhanging canopy, which can be done at this time. It's the canopy that triggers the need for the setback variance. Now, the applicant's contention is that if they do not put a third lane in, it puts the store at a disadvantage and makes it outdated. Now, not having a third lane that will save a customer a few minutes of their time cannot make a store as big as Menards obsolete. It is a little far-fetched of a claim. The two lanes currently provide required service to the lot. The applicant responded to a planning commission meeting query that it would help a customer save 2 to 3 minutes of their time by using an automated lane. While this might be a practice with the store, this is not adequate justification to deviate from an ordinance standard. Menards is a one-of-a-kind store. It's not something that you see very frequently. It is not merely there to serve the local community. It is a regional landmark store. So people drive from far out areas in order to reach the Menards. To state that the lack of a third covered automated kiosk lane would make this business non-competitive is not reasonable. Compliance with the ordinance standards would in no way hinder the applicant's ability to provide the service they desire. They could place an automatic kiosk, which is done all the time in case of some ATM kiosks, or even if you go to long-term parking lots, they just have a kiosk. That can still be done without the need for a canopy, and compliance with the ordinance at this time is not construed as being unnecessarily burdensome. The second standard is that the variance will provide substantial justice to the applicant as well as other property owners. It would do substantial justice because they would get the ability to build an addition, but it's not fair to the other property owners in this district who are being required to meet all of the setbacks. The third criteria is that the plight of the owner is due to unique circumstances associated with the property, and there are nearly no unique circumstances associated with the site at this time. It is one of the largest parcels in the Belleville Road corridor, and at this time, the whole reason for adding a third automated kiosk is to bring this site into line with what the Menards corporate standard is. I believe most of the Menards stores now have a third automated kiosk lane, and this site is also being upgraded in order to meet what the corporate standard is. It, however, does not meet the test for unique circumstances as defined by the ordinance. The fourth criteria is the problem self-created or not. At this point of time, we believe the need for the variance is entirely self-created by the applicant's desire to put on an addition that aligns with the corporate needs for Menards itself. In addition to these standards, the zoning ordinance has a series of smaller standards for approval, which I shall summarize. Considering this variance tonight is a valid exercise of the township's police power. Approval of the variance is not going to impair light or air to the adjacent properties, but it is likely to set a precedent. At this time, the 25-foot setback is a setback required for all commercial properties from their side lot lines. The applicant has already received a benefit of a reduced green belt modification. Now, granting a variance from the setback basically sets a precedent for other property owners with much smaller lots to go and ask for a deviation from the green belt setback so that they can maximize their building envelopes on the site. So it will inadvertently set a precedent for similar requests from other property owners. The request is not going to increase the hazard of fire or flood or endanger public safety. It's not going to diminish property values within the area or impair public health, safety, morals, and welfare. We do believe approval of this variance will essentially alter the character of the neighborhood, because on a site as big as this, a 10-foot setback variance might not make a noticeable difference. But when the same kind of setback variance is translated to a smaller commercial zone property, the lack of adequate setbacks and separations between adjacent properties will be very noticeable, which will markedly alter the character of the Belleville Road overlay district and its character. The purpose of zoning regulations is to provide for orderly and planned use of land. At this time, the request for variance does not meet the test. Based on our review of the proposal and any additional details to be presented by the applicant, at this time, it's our recommendation that the Board of Zoning Appeals deny the requested variance for Menards located at 10010 Belleville Road, subject to the 13 findings of fact that are listed in the McKenna review letter dated January 4th of 2023. I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. The presentation by the applicant. Do you wish to speak or make comments, please?
Through the chair, while Mr. Edwards comes up, just a reminder that there is material, significant narrative from the applicant in your packet, and then there's also some images that, Mr. Edwards, if you want to pan through the PDF pages, you can refer to those as well.
Oh, sure. See them. Thank you. Thank you. Tyler Edwards. I am a real estate representative with Menards here tonight to talk about our yard gate extension request. Key word here, I think, is intent, both from our side and from the ordinance side. You know, the Menards intent is to remain in the Belleville Road corridor forever. That's how we've been in business for 60+ years. It's by adapting our business model to meet market conditions, consumer demand. So when I say that 5 years ago when we built the store, we had no idea there'd be an online order pickup program at Menards and every other retail store in the country, that's true. We didn't account for that. 10 years before that, 20 years before that, our store has changed throughout time. That's simply why we still exist. I think if you go ask the leaders of Bed Bath & Beyond or Sears or JCPenney, they would tell you that they did not adapt fast enough, and that impacted the business. So while we're okay today, we don't know what the future holds. That's the key intent of our side, making this required. Now, the intent of the ordinance is to protect the neighbors. At least my interpretation. That 25-foot setback is to protect the neighboring property from a large commercial building being too close. In your commercial districts, they can be 40 feet tall. In the case of this gate, it's less than 20 feet tall. But there's also 180 feet separating the nearest residential building. There's a road, there's a pond, and a wetland, which means the closest anyone could be to our property line is 180 feet with their residential building. So that intent is really maintained just by the natural features, the natural buffers between the two. The reason the gate needs a canopy, there's two reasons. One of them safety, one of the other is security. If you look at the gate today, it is a 312 pitch steel roof. And the intention is that snow slides off the roof to the north away from traffic, not in the front of the gate, not behind the gate. If we were to simply add another lane, the snow would slide into that lane, onto our equipment, onto people's vehicles in the middle of it. Now, this is Michigan. That is a 30, 40-foot span. That's quite a bit of snow falling on the equipment, on the people. The extension carries that to the north. So that's a safety feature. You could tear down the entire gate, rebuild it. That certainly seems unreasonable to me at the cost of about $500,000. That's fairly significant. Now, the other part of this is you can't actually see the gate hardly at all unless you're in front of it, behind it, or in it. There's significant tree screening on the sides, which we are replacing to help that buffer remain. Yes, it will be 10 feet into the 25-foot setback. However, when it's behind those 15, 20-foot tall pine trees that we're going to end up moving, the screening remains somewhat identical. There's no new lights. There's the fence around the outside. It helps maintain the visual, it lessens the visual impact from the outside. So while, some of the key words from the staff report say, well, 2-3 minutes isn't worth everyone's time. But it could be, right? Because we're doing transactions, hundreds and thousands an hour. People are using these not only here, but at 336 Menards stores across the country. That adds up. So when I say this is an important part of our business model, it's not here, it's everywhere, right? We want to be here forever. 30,000 retail stores closed their doors in the last 4 years, and only half of those were because of COVID. We're trying not to be one of those. We want to maintain our presence by adapting. That's really the key component to all of this. Now, when you say the store isn't unique, or the variance request isn't unique, the store itself is unique, right? There's no other 200,000 square foot box on 16 acres, bringing thousands of people into this corridor. So I personally think variance criteria are very subjective, depending on how you think of it. I don't think we're setting a precedent, because every variance should really be weighed on its own merits. A smaller parcel or another box couldn't come in here unless they have a justifiable case, similar to what we have said. We're increasing safety, we maintain security. We think we're bringing this store in compliance with all the other Menards stores across the country.
Thank you. Any comments from the board?
Through the chair,
Yes,
can you speak to the percentage of business that you currently have due to these self-service kiosks right now, and what your projected business would be for the future?
I don't have an exact percentage. I do know that the average gate, the gate today sees 100 to 200 cars an hour. The online order pickup sees about half of that. Just in general, that the main gate sees semi-traffic, people in the store. And then so far, the online order pickups have been about half of the regular gate traffic.
So roughly about 50 customers per hour currently.
Yep.
Just at this location.
Yep, and that's at all of our locations too. That's a broad number.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
any other?
Mr.
Yeah.
Chair, I'm Mr. Edwards. Mr. Evans, nice to see you again. He was in front of the Planning Commission on the December 14th meeting. As the Planning Commission representative to this board, I wanted to make 1 or 2 comments. One being that I know that the minutes from that meeting were presented in part of the packet. I feel I have to call out that those are not approved. Those are preliminary meeting minutes. They won't undergo approval or editing until tomorrow at the Planning Commission meeting. However, I do agree with what I read in the minutes that the Planning Commissioners in general, we're not against modifying the Greenbelt standard. We're the BZA to vote in favor of the variance. But I think it's also important to understand that that's not saying that permission has been granted by the Planning Commission, conditionally or otherwise. If the BZA were to grant the variance, Mr. Edwards would need to come back in front of the Planning Commission in order to formally have the Greenbelt modification. We won't simply be cutting down some trees to build a canopy. They'll be re-landscaped with a full landscape plan. The trees will be replaced, and the Planning Commission will have to review this before any other action occurs. That's the only clarification I had for you on this as your Planning Commission.
Well, thank you very much. You got a comment?
Not really, I'm just second what Jeff said there, that unless he has something that he'd like to say about what Jeff stated, that before we even start talking about agreeing or not agreeing to go along with you or not, that my thoughts are that maybe we should do a postponement, and let you and whomever get together and bring it back to us as Jeff is stating, rather than us to assume that it's gonna be this, that, and the other.
Sure, can I respond to that?
Yes, please do.
Sure, so the site plan that I submitted, if I can get back to that on your slides. Actually showed, I think what you were talking about with the replacement of all the landscaping, the distances, as intended as I described in that planning commission meeting. Although I think there's 7 or 8 mature trees that actually are savable according to the local landscaper that we had talked to. So those would be relocated on the outside of the new expansion. So that was the plan we submitted. And it's in conformance with the original plan. All the trees are there, and actually the same trees are used, and they're between 10 and 15 feet tall. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we did get ahead of the on that and made sure that we are compliant with everything the planning commission at least originally approved, and I think would have wanted.
Yes. Go ahead.
That wasn't really a question I was asking, I was more of a statement. And trying to tie in what Jeff had mentioned as well as what Lydia had talked about. Because we will not set a precedent. So that what we are looking at doing is trying to do everything we can do to help you. But we need to see it on paper and have it before we get into a deep discussion. Because it could be denied, or it could be whatever, and I'd rather it be on paper so we have some factual evidence to talk about, if that makes sense.
I see videos and for please.
Just as a point of clarification, when this project goes back before the planning commission is not considering modifying the greenbelt standards. The planning commission has already modified it from 20 to 10 feet. All the planning commission will be doing is reviewing the plantings within that greenbelt that is already at a 10 feet width. And the reason that comment was included in my review letter was, if the planning commission had not granted the modification from 20 feet to 10 feet, Menards would not be before you tonight asking for the setback variance because there would be no room to put that third lane home.
If I could add to that, the planning commission is waiting to see whether or not there is a variance granted that would allow Mr. Edwards to move forward. And we're not waiting for more plans for Mr. Edwards. He submitted the plans. And the problem is that his plans have part of the structure goes over the setback line. The planning commission doesn't have the power to grant that request to Mr. Edwards. It only has discretionary power when it comes to moving some trees around. And that is a question that was brought in front of the planning commission. Would the planning commission be averse to considering moving those trees? And the answer was, if you get the variance, we would certainly, the consensus seemed to be that we would do it. It hasn't been done formally yet because the variance hasn't been granted.
That's correct. And nothing will happen until we vote one way or the other.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Mr. Chair. Yes. Trustee Martin.
Excuse me. Mr. Edwards, could you explain once again why that the current one entrance lane is not suitable for someone to scan their receipt and get to the back?
Sure, it's probably easier to describe based on what it isn't. You know that it isn't. The new lane is an automated kiosk where you take your phone or a piece of paper you print off, you scan it at the kiosk, it lets you in. What it also does is notifies the attendant in the order pickup area that you are there to pick up your product so it can be brought out to the vehicle loading area. That system got put in place because Menards has some larger, bulky sales items, right? You could order a dishwasher through this program and it can be brought to your car, where otherwise you'd be waiting for 20 minutes for someone to go get it. The normal entrance lane, I'll call it the middle entrance lane, is run by what we call a gate guard. It's a guard attendant who checks a slip or receipt as you're going in and directs you to where you're supposed to go elsewhere in the yard. It also checks semi-loads to make sure they're at the right location and where they're supposed to end up going. So he's more of a director of commercial traffic, where this is more of a I'll call it a residential or personal traffic lane. And then that gate guard also checks people as they leave to make sure they're not taking extra things with them.
I don't understand why you couldn't just put a reader in that one lane. I'm kind of, you're gonna build an entire lane just so they can scan a receipt to go to the bank. Why can't that be added to the existing lane now without this variance?
Because you'd still be in that queue waiting to get into that lane. Today's people demand immediate satisfaction, whether it's social media, self-checkout, scanning, order pickup. So we're accommodating that, if you will. Someone that's ordering their groceries or their Menards supplies wants to be able to scan, pick it up, go home because they feel their time is valuable. They don't want to wait behind a semi truck that's taking 5 minutes to check in.
And that could be accomplished by the side lane without the key.
Correct, but then the side lane can go in, correct me if I'm wrong, staff, with or without a variance. It's the canopy extension that we're using.
That's our problem.
Yes, to add to the safety and security of our equipment and people that are underneath the canopy.
Okay. Mr. Hollis, you got any comments? Or? I have one myself.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
could I please ask Mr. Edwards a question?
Yes,
Mr. Edwards, there are canopy designs, roof designs that address snow loads. It's done all the time in apartment complexes that have carports because you don't want the car to be backing out and have all the snow from the carport roof slide out onto the car. Recently, in one of my other clients, I did review an apartment complex and a senior living facility that had carports, and the carport roofs were designed to address snow loads and snow sliding off for safety. Is there not some measure that can be incorporated into the existing canopy roof to prevent that from happening, that the snow won't land on a car or a vehicle that you're concerned about?
Not without tearing the canopy off and rebuilding it to be a flat roof. The key here is that, in this particular case, there's 3 directions that are not the Menards store, right? There's in front of the gate, there's behind the gate, and then there's north of the gate. The snow has to go one of those directions. In front of the gate, there's traffic, there's cars, right? If you were to tip it towards Belleville Road, snow would be landing on cars in front of the gates. If you tipped it toward their yard, there would also be snow going into the yards. You could dam up the end of the slope, right, to stop it from sliding into the yard. But at a certain point, there'd be too much snow and it would exceed the limits that this canopy has been constructed to. That's why we think that's unreasonable to redo the whole canopy just for snow loads. Because it's a substantial change, in our opinion.
Would it be possible to put the automated kiosk just beyond the limit of the existing canopy so that the car is not parked there and have the snow landing on them while they are scanning their paper? Could the kiosk be placed, say, at the far edge inside your yard so that a customer could use it without having the snow land on top of them? If at all the snow, currently, I'm sure if there's a heavy snowfall, the snow does eventually slide off based on what you're saying. It won't land on a vehicle. Is there any option that the kiosk could actually be placed slightly to the front so that it will avoid the situation you're concerned about?
Yeah, so if you move it forward, which we've thought about, the snow still lands in the lane, which that much snow causes a 3-4 foot pile if it's significant. And then if there's 2 cars queued, it lands on the second car. So it's still a hazard in our opinion.
So how is it addressed today? Because it does that right now. So does slide and land on the third lane.
There's no third lane today.
So right now you're just piling it up onto the landscape island at the edge of it.
Yes, it slides off of the roof to the north side where those pine trees are and lands next to the pine trees.
No, my questions have already been answered.
okay, yeah, I have the.
Thank you.
But, go ahead.
Is this part of the, our board discussion or is this?
Yeah, this part of our discussion, yes.
I got to say, people.
Yeah, go ahead. You got the floor.
I shop at Menards quite a bit, and I have never seen a line up to get into the back of Menards. I used that extensively during COVID, and even then, I've never seen a kind of car lineup that you described with 8 or 9 cars coming in or out. I've never seen it, so. And I've been to Menards at all types of, all kinds of, I'm sorry, at all times of the day and whatever, and I've never seen that type of backup.
Yeah, I've had the same experience. I usually, in fact, I was there last week. So, one thing for staff, on the application. The application has not been notarized, I'm sorry. You don't have a copy that is notarized for the zoning appeal? If we don't have, it.
I will, I don't have it present.
There's one-
I will verify that.
Okay.
Check that.
I'm
Apologies.
stickler for details, sorry.
Sure, sure.
Any other discussion? Okay, then, time to vote. I'll accept the motion to approve or deny. Whatever your pleasure is.
Motion to approve.
Is there support for the motion to approve?
Through the chair.
Yes,
If there's a possibility that you may have a mix of votes, you can always also entertain a informal discussion and then have somebody make a motion based on what appears to be the majority vote. Just for clarity of record, that's sometimes a good idea. It just might be worth having a kind of informal discussion.
Let me say this, if I can, to the chair, the reason that I'm making the motion to approve. Obviously, because, as we are the BZA, we look at independent situations, right? This situation, I feel, is different than when someone else would be able to come to us and approach us for the same variance. It's a larger lot. There's a larger gap between industrial, commercial business here, and then residential as well, with ponds and landscapes to break that up. With that being said, I also understand corporate environments, previous past, it's the future is going automated, right? As much as they would like to automate, they're already doing 50 cars on a hourly basis that are automated pickups. That is going to increase, is my understanding. I mean, I'd like to know the percentage that you guys have it forecasted for, but I understand that is going to increase. It wasn't a thing 5 years ago, probably wasn't that big of a thing before COVID, to be honest.
yeah.
So that is my reasoning for approval.
To the chair.
Yes,
During this presentation, he said that all Menard stores were going through this renovation, and he kind of made it sound like that if this doesn't get approved, that Menards could possibly close and move out of Van Buren Township. That's kind of what it sounded like to me, and I don't know if that was your intent to make it sound like that, or what was going on with that. And as far as the motion, I'm kind of inclined to rely on our staff's recommendations, as I've said before, you've heard me say this before in meetings. But if it's the pleasure of this board, then that's what it is.
well, I still haven't heard a second on the motion, so we can discuss.
Can we talk a little bit more?
Yeah, we can discuss, go ahead.
I'm sorry, through the chair. Procedurally, there's a motion on the floor, so I guess we have to, if it doesn't get a second, then it kind of dies on the vine, so.
Yeah, I was gonna ask for a second for 3 times. Is there a second to the motion on the floor? Is there a second to the motion on the floor? Is there a second to the motion on the floor? Seeing none, the motion failed for lack of support. Anybody wish to make a new motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to deny this variance.
Please state the motion and all that.
So case number 22-042, I make the motion to deny the request by Tyler Edwards on behalf of Menards Inc. for 10010 Belleville Road, parcel ID as printed for a variance from section 3.112E for D2 Extensive Highway Business District. North side setback.
There's been a motion. Mr. Jar, Mr. Haas, is there a second to the motion? Is there a second to the motion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'm a representative from an alternate board, and normally when we take these sort of action motions, though I don't believe there's any prohibition against a board rep from making a motion or seconding it on these sort of action motions. I will throw my discussion in and say that I do believe that the problem is self-created and that another solution could be found. And that because the problem is self-created, the rules of Michigan zoning don't allow me to vote for approval when I think that the problem is self-created. So if none of the other board members would be willing to make a second, I would certainly be in support of that motion to deny in this case. Although I will say, I hope that another solution can be found.
Through the chair, I support the motion.
All right, it's been motioned and supported by trustee Martin. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, can the secretary please call the roll?
John Herman,
Yes.
Amos Brissette,
Yes.
trustee Kevin Martin,
Yes.
John Haas,
Yes.
Jeffrey Jar,
Yes.
Aaron Sellers.
No.
That's why we have a roll call. The motion is adopted as 6-1. 6-1. 6 yes, 1 no. 5?
5-1,
Okay, I'm miscounting.
that's okay.
That's why you got the correction. Thank you. Only to say that there's options for this to make it happen, and we cannot go outside of our scope of what we're allowed to do. This is self-created, and there's different options that they can pursue if they wish to. So it's not that they can't have it, just can't have it this way. Thank you very much. Moving on. Peace. Going to the first one or second one? This is case number 22057 is next.
Yes.
Okay. Basil Construction on behalf of Meyer Incorporated. The location is 9701 Belleville Road, parcel number 83-058-99-006-710. Zone C1 Extensive Highway Business District. Request from Basil Construction on behalf of Myers is to request and to install wall sign area of 628.77 square feet. The site is zone C2 Extensive Highway Business District. This is contrary to section 11-108B time regulations applicable to the C, C1, C2, and FS districts, as described below. Allowable maximum height, maximum wall sign area of 3 square feet per linear foot of building frontage not to exceed 300 square feet per business, or 50% of the facade, exclusive of windows and door opening. Existing door wall sign area of the Meyer store and the gas station is 266.7 square feet. The proposed wall sign area of the Myers Store and Gas Station is 628.77 feet. The variance requested is for 328.77 square feet. A presentation by the staff or the planners, whoever wants to go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll defer again to the planning consultant for this. And again, there's a model motion where you can use your findings of fact to make a motion. And again, maybe informally discuss before you make a motion.
Thank you, Director Powell, members of the board. As the chairman previously summarized, the request before you tonight is from Meyer, located on Belleville Road, for the total amount of wall signage that is allowable on both the main grocery store and on the gas station combined. The maximum permitted is 300 square feet. What's being proposed is 628.77 square feet. The variance is for 328.77 square feet. Now, the zoning ordinance has specific standards for reviewing sign variances, which is not the same as the standards that you used in reviewing the previous case. Sign variances have a different set of standards and the additional standards that are based on Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, which sets forth the power of this Board of Zoning Appeals. I'll summarize those in brief. The first standard is that the permitted signage could not easily be seen by passing motorists due to the configuration of the existing buildings, trees or other obstructions which cannot be legally and or practically removed. Now, for the applicant, the existing square footage of the signs on the store and the gas station are 266.07 square feet. Basically, all of the signage is on the grocery store, and the gas station has no wall signs except what is on the canopy itself that says Meyer. Now, the proposed signs are about 600 square feet for the building itself, the main grocery store, and about 28.89 square feet for the gas station. The change in the signage is part of Meyer's remodeling efforts, which they have been doing for stores all across Michigan. All the stores are being updated, remodeled, exterior and interior, and updating the signage seems to be part of that whole package. The applicant's justification in requesting the variances is that the existing building is located over 600 feet from Belleville Road and behind other businesses on the outlots, and that large signs on the building wall will allow customers to identify which section of the store they may need access to for quick shopping. Now, the Meyer store in Van Buren Township is several decades old. It is one of the first businesses that was established along the Belleville Road corridor. As such, that store is a landmark in the community itself. The store provides for the needs of residents in the community and is pretty well known in the area. Having wall signage that is more than double what currently exists and is allowed by the ordinance, because the store needs additional visibility, is not adequate justification. While signage is necessary, and the whole point of signage is to be able to direct customers and clients to provide for a better experience, the volume of signage that is being proposed at this time is not unnecessary. Even with additional signage, the store will still have only 2 entrances. Now, the entrance that is on the pharmacy side is very distinct and different from the other entrance with the garden center area. Those are visible even from the parking lot without any signs. So any customer who parks in the parking lot has to enter through one or other of the entrances. And once you enter the store, the newly remodeled stores have very good signage that is suspended from the ceiling, clearly directing you to different parts of the store based upon what you want to shop for. The applicant's contention that the lack of signage will, as I quote, hinder business and sales really holds no merit. The signage allowed is 300 square feet, is the maximum signage that is allowed for any business in the C2 district. And it can be effectively used to install signage that would identify the business from a customer experience. Just to give you a comparison, right now they have 266 square feet of signage. They are allowed to go up to 300, including that and the gas station. So to say that you actually need 600 on the building wall itself to be visible and provide a customer experience is really unsubstantiated. A proliferation of larger signs on the facade will not eliminate any of the buildings on the outlots. All those businesses are going to remain, or They cannot remove the trees because that is part of the Belleville Road corridor overlay district plantings. The second criteria is that the permitted signage could not be seen by passing motorists in sufficient time to permit safe deceleration and exit. So basically, the board has to review whether there are adequate lanes and ability for customers to notice the business, so they don't just drive past it and realize that they have actually missed it, creating a safety hazard because they're trying to turn around. Now, the site has an area of approximately 40 acres. That's the size of the Meyer site, and it's got multiple entrances off Belleville Road and Tyler Road. It allows customers who are either northbound or southbound on Belleville Road numerous opportunities to see the store. Even if they miss the first entrance off Belleville Road, heading north, they can enter through the gas station entrance. They miss that, they can turn going through the Tyler Road entrance. There are multiple avenues for turning in and out of the store. It's not a situation where it's got only one in and out, and if you pass by, you're sort of lost and you have to turn around into a service lane to make your way back. The excessive wall signage is not going to provide any benefit in terms of site safety or access. Third standard is existing signs on nearby parcels would substantially reduce visibility or advertising impact of a conforming sign on the subject parcel. None of the existing signs on the nearby parcels is going to affect Meyer. There are monument signs also allowed along Tyler Road and Belleville Road frontage on which Meyer can advertise. So in addition to the wall signs, they're also allowed ground signs, which would allow them to direct businesses to their store itself. Belleville Road is part of the township's core downtown area, and the streetscape plan with its trees goes a long way towards creating the image of an upscale community that Van Buren has tried so hard to create. Removal of mature trees or removal of any vegetation for sign visibility is not really sound planning. The next criteria is construction of a conforming sign would obstruct the vision of motorists or otherwise endanger health and safety of passers-by. This variance is related to wall signs, not really monument signs, so we are not talking about obstructing line of sight when vehicles are turning in or out of the site. In addition to these, there are several appeal standards, whether strict conformance to the ordinance would be burdensome to the applicant. We believe with a combination of monument signs and wall signs within the permitted sign area limit, the newly remodeled Meyer store would be just as attractive, if not more attractive to customers, and will bring the same amount of customers in. Would the variance do substantial justice to the applicant? Yes. However, approval of a variance for larger sign, simply because a business thinks a larger sign is going to create more business or support existing business, is just setting a precedent for other businesses saying we would like a larger sign for more visibility too. It is unjustified. Is the plight of the owner due to unique circumstances associated with the property? At this time, we don't see any unique circumstances. Once again, like the previous case, this is one of the largest parcels that is located in the Belleville Road corridor, and it's also a corner lot. As a result, the amount of signage that is allowed by the ordinance is significantly higher for this parcel than it is for almost any other parcel that is in the Belleville Road corridor. Is the problem self-created? The applicant's contention that signage is required to direct their customer traffic and increase business to the site and benefit customers is not substantiated by any data or facts. We have reviewed numerous cases which have stated that larger signs, more signs bring in business. There is really no study or facts ever submitted to substantiate such a claim. In addition to this, there are general standards, which are, this is a valid exercise of the township police power for you to consider this variance tonight. The wall signs will not impair light or air. They're not going to affect or endanger public health, safety, welfare, or the morals of citizens in the community. Approval of larger wall signs, however, will alter the character of the Belleville Road corridor, commercial corridor, and is likely to set an undesirable precedent. The purpose, as I mentioned previously too, of zoning is not intended as an obstructionary tool. It is intended as a means for orderly and planned development of land, so that everybody doesn't get to do just what they want. Then the consequences of it on their neighbors and other public cannot be measured. The request at this time is contrary to the interest of zoning ordinance and sound planning principles. Based on our review of the sign proposal, our request at this time is for the Board of Zoning Appeals to deny the requested variance from Meyer for the property located at 9701 Belleville Road, subject to the 16 findings of fact listed in the Mackinac Review Letter dated January 4th, 2023. I would be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Does the applicant have anything to present to the board? Would you please come up to the microphone and thank you.
Hello, my name is Sarah. I sit here on behalf of Basel Construction, and I just had more so a question in regards to the packets that I submitted to you. So I understand that you guys completely denied the larger sign. However, I wanted to see, is there a meeting that I can set up to kind of discuss the packet more personally one-on-one to see what would be approved or denied, because there are so many signs in here. I know that we're only allowed the specific square footage, and we try to meet them, but I feel like one of the Meyer signs really is a larger one, because I know that we did do away with a few other signs that were there originally. Is that something that we could do or set up at this time?
Go ahead,
Through the
Sam.
Chair, so certainly if you're looking to find ways to come into compliance with the zoning ordinance and see what the options are for different sign layouts, I'd be glad to have a discussion.
Okay, so we would have to should I just call you tomorrow morning?
That's definitely always an option, yes. Yep,
Okay.
so you can call me and I can coordinate my contact information with you following the meeting. If I don't know if there's if you'd like to present anything else about the sign package tonight.
No, it was just mainly my concern was to discuss what was within it, to see what I can do to, I guess, come into compliance.
I
Okay.
believe you could always meet with Derek DePauw, and he's more than willing to work to see which signs would fit within the ordinance limits and which signs are absolutely essential for Meyer, for your business to function well, so that we can get those on the building, and which would be considered as unnecessary.
Exactly. That's what was my main concern.
Yeah, absolutely. We can be in touch very soon. And through the chair, if that's the direction, it's probably worth postponing any action and allowing some time for
Yeah.
possible withdrawal of the request.
Be aware that if we deny it, it's final. So if you want to table, postpone it, that's
I would
that's
like,
fine. But once we decide here tonight on any motion, that's fine. So it's up to you. We're not putting pressure on you, but be aware of whatever happens tonight, we can vote to postpone, and that's fine. Thank you. So what's the pleasure of the board?
Make a motion that we give her a chance to get what she needs together, postpone our portion of it until later.
Support. The motion is support by Sellers? Okay. Any discussion on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise, the motion carries. Thank you very much for attending. Yes.
I'd like to ask if we can take a brief 5-minute recess. We've been at this for over 90 minutes now.
There's no objection to that.
I would second that.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Likewise, carried. We're adjourned for 5 minutes.
What about you?
This one up here. Well, that's open.
I don't think so. No, I think you're okay. Yeah, with the Zoom thing, it's never been an exact science. So I have it just rolling, but I'm just gonna probably sit there and go through everything and just have an image of it. Okay. Tyler is still, I'll give my business here. Yeah, I can give you my business. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for. Okay, okay, very good. We'll be in touch soon. Thanks. I guess I got.
yacht club to install 2 docks structured each with a length not to exceed 120 feet. Subject to the approval by the state of Michigan, in contrast to the length requirement of section 3.120D5 of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance, which limits dock lengths to 40 feet into the Belleville Lake. Measured perpendicularly, the subject site is Township Lake property adjacent to 831 East Shore River Drive. And then, again, I already mentioned the parcel number on the north side of East Shore River Drive between Loza Lane and Evelyn Court. This site is zoned to Belleville Lake Shoreline District B, non-single family residential district. The zoning request will be reviewed by the BZA first. The requirements of section 3.120F-7 of the Van Buren Township ordinance. Presentation by the staff, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I try to just make sure I can pull up an image of the site, give me just one moment, I apologize. Okay, we're getting close. Okay, so this is just a contextual view of the site that's being considered for this request. I will go through all of the findings from a staff standpoint on this request. And I will also just briefly explain that we also have our planning consultant and our municipal services director here tonight, who can also provide some technical insight. Staff primarily reviews applications for development on township lake property and other public properties throughout the township and other various requests. So in that consistency with past practice in that regard, I'm reviewing the request tonight. As mentioned, this is a request for an exception, modification, or appeal by Belleville Yacht Club to install 2 dock structures, each with a length not to exceed 120 feet, subject to approval by the state of Michigan, which is in contrast to the requirements of section 3.120D5 of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance, which limits dock length to 40 feet into Belleville Lake in the nature that the chair described. The request will be reviewed by the BZA tonight per the requirements of section 3.120F7 of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. Section 3.120 of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance is what's called the Belleville Lake Shoreline Districts Ordinance. It was adopted years ago, and the current version of it is section 3.120 of the current zoning ordinance, which is adopted in 2017. That 2017 comprehensive update to the zoning ordinances, I believe just after the adoption of this Belleville Lake Shoreline Ordinance. This whole ordinance applies to property in what's called the township lake property, which is defined as land owned by the township at Belleville Lake, whether or not it is above the normal high water mark and is the property that exists below the lake lot line and extends into Belleville Lake and is generally recognized as the property below the 655-foot contour or brow of the hill. Exceptions or modifications to standards of section 3.120 require a review process outlined in section 3.120F of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. These are exceptions or modifications which are not considered variances. So that's just an important point. This being the township lake property and having a unique set of circumstances around it, modifications from the standards in the township lake property are not handled as variances in the traditional sense for perhaps a development site where you have the same findings for practical difficulty or the same criteria for variances. There are, however, criteria that I will go over in this report that need to be addressed. So again, this is a exception request and not a variance request as defined in state law and the zoning ordinance. The report that I'll share has findings based on section 3.120F And I'll first go through some of the background information of the site. The chair has mentioned where the site is located several times. You see just a basic Google Earth view, which we can refer to if we need to take measurements or discuss anything more in depth. The property owner is the Belleville Yacht Club. The site is zoned Belleville Lake Shoreline District B, non-single family residential, or BLB. And when I refer to the site, I'm referring to the portion of the site that's being considered for this request that's actually in the Township Lake property. That is adjacent to an upland parcel that is zoned R1C, which is where the Belleville Yacht Club building and other site improvements are located, which is a single family residential zoning district. That site is used as a private club with an accessory building and a pool. Despite the single family residential zoning, the parcel is used as a private club, which is considered as a use similar to an institutional use. It is not a single family residential use. The way the ordinance terminology is spelled out in this ordinance, anything that is not used as single family residential dwelling upland generally is going to be considered a BLP in the water adjacent to it. Again, the project involves a set of structures that has a total length of 120 feet. Each dock stem, which would be the long part of the dock that is perpendicular to the shore as defined in our ordinance, paraphrase, but that's generally how it's defined. Those stems will be 120 feet long, and each stem will contain one main stem, which is 4 feet wide, along with 4 perpendicular docks, which is 4 feet wide times 24 feet long. So those are those 24-foot sections oriented inward. And I can show you on the packet tonight, of which the last page, I believe, is the plan, what I'm referring to there. In a minute. So if you see these, that's actually the smaller graphic with your packet. Let me just get to the larger one. So here's the 24-foot wide, the 24-foot long perpendicular docks attached to each dock stem. Separating those docks are gaps of 28 feet, 28 feet, 24 feet, and 24 feet, heading out toward the outer extent. The docks are, the proposed use will be considered a marina as defined in section 3.120B15 of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. Marinas are also defined under state of Michigan Natural Resources Environmental Protection Act, PA 451 of 1994. I'll call it NAREPA if I refer to it again to avoid all the statutory jargon. But these marinas under that act are regulated by the state of Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, or EGLE. The proposed marina use will replace 2 existing dock structures that each accommodate, I believe, 16 boats maximum capacity. And the idea is to replace those previous dock structures or existing dock structures with these, which replace a design that has a double loaded stem with docks on the outside and inside, with these longer single loaded stems that have the docks just facing the inside. The marina use will also require special approval in the BLP district. And so in accordance with that requirement, a public hearing has also been scheduled and a review process has been started for review by the Planning Commission. The marina use would also require approval of the Township Board of Trustees as a special approval use in this district. For tonight's meeting, a public hearing was also required, of course, and a notice for the public hearing was published in the Belleville Area Independent on December 21st, 2022. And notices were mailed to the owners of real property within 300 feet of the subject upland parcel on December 21st as well. So again, to just really just summarize the nature of the request, the allowable maximum length of those docks is 40 feet into the lake, measured perpendicularly to the shoreline, unless greater length is necessary to reach water depth with a depth of 3 feet. The dock is proposed to be extended 120 feet into the lake, measured perpendicularly to the shoreline. The BZA shall not grant a special exception to any provision of section 3.120 unless it first makes all of the findings in section 3.120 F7C of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance, which are standards for special exceptions. And these findings are evaluated in the rest of my report, which I'll summarize here. And I will make a comment that there were some later changes to the review packet that I've noted in this report that I'll call out as I speak, but these changes represent and kind of reflect one of the comments from one of the members of the public tonight, that there was a more general statement about the community access to this site. I wanted to be a little bit more specific about the type of service that this provides and who it actually involves. So I did make some clarifying edits to my report regarding that. But I will say that there's a stated purpose of the Belleville Yacht Club, which I will summarize. Actually, I'm sorry. First, I will state that the first of 5 criteria for standards for special exceptions is that enforcement of the provisions requested for special exception would unnecessarily prevent the reasonable use of the land or boats involved without resulting benefit to the public health, safety, and welfare of persons or property. In response to this criterion, I'll mention that the stated purpose of the Belleville Yacht Club, according to their website, includes creating a community of boat owners and watercraft enthusiasts through events and social gatherings, inducting new boaters through youth and family programs. And I'll just paraphrase, not to just hash out the intent, which you can find on their website, but it deals primarily with boating and aquatic access. So in response to this intent, I will say that the Belleville Yacht Club provides distinct services that are rooted in boating and watercraft to its members, some of whom do not reside in properties with lake frontage. So there is an element of what is provided here that brings access to boating and lake access to a broader group in terms of people who are members of the Belleville Yacht Club who may or may not have direct access to the lake. With this intent being very heavily focused in boating access and education, there is a certain amount of dockage that can be considered essential to a purpose like that. However, this property is constrained in how much dockage it can provide within the 40-foot shoreline extension limit, given that it only has approximately 132 feet of lake frontage on a 4.04 acre parcel. That frontage is consistent more with some of the single family residential zone sites. It's certainly wider than some, but it's probably more consistent with those than with a more traditionally understood commercial use or institutional use. So with a relatively narrow frontage and the need based on the service that's provided to have a certain amount of dockage, the site does need to go relatively farther out to meet that intent. By way of comparison, and I did hear a comment that Sandy's Marina is not exactly a comparison, and it provides a different type of service and it's a different type of business, to be sure. But with this site being just over 4 acres with 132 feet of shoreline, by way of comparison, Sandy's Marina would be an example of a marina that has over 750 feet of frontage and actually smaller amount of land area. So roughly speaking, to accommodate a sufficient amount of dockage for the Belleville Yacht Club, the need is there to go out, and that kind of ties back to the first criterion again, that the reasonable use of the land for this boating purpose, for the purpose that they provide, the service that they provide, would require going farther than the 40 feet. The second criterion is that the special exception would not unduly prevent the realization of the purposes of this ordinance. Again, this is an item that I paraphrased, but I've provided in the packet the purpose of the Belleville Lake Shoreline District's ordinance. It includes recognizing and concluding that the proper and safe use of Belleville Lake is desirable to retain and maintain the physical, ecological, cultural, and aesthetic characteristics of the lake and the township, to preserve and protect the quality and safety of the lake and shorelines and the rights of adjacent owners and users, as well as the township as a whole, to promote the public health, safety, and welfare of all persons making use of the lake, among other items. And there are some items related to the township's ownership of the lake in relation to, its, connection to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Or when you're looking at the broad purpose of the ordinance, the BZA really should evaluate whether the overall quality of construction, the nature of the use, and the physical impact associated with the extended dock structures, and should have assurance that the use and structures will be evaluated thoroughly for consistency with the physical, ecological, cultural, and aesthetic characteristics of the lake. There's another criterion that kind of overlaps with this one that I'll speak to later, but broadly the use will need to be demonstrated to meet these, retain these qualities for the lake. Broadly, the use will be for the mooring and launching of boats and will not involve fueling, repair, or more intensive marina activities associated with conventional marinas. And I will also mention that EGLE will additionally review the application for consistency with the requirements of Part 301 of NERIPA to ensure that the marina extends from riparian property sufficiently and meets some other standards. Being that the proposed dock structures are subject to any necessary review and approval by EGLE and by FERC, and that the applicant has stated that this use will not include fueling. These areas of purview by the other agencies, the relative limits on the usage, provide comfort that this use will be responsibly pursued and reviewed adequately to meet the intent of the Belleville Lake Shoreline District Ordinance. And again, there are issues regarding setbacks and maneuverability and navigability that have been brought up, and I will speak to those in this next criterion, which is that the special exception would not cause substantial harm or detriment to the adjacent or nearby lands or boats or the public interest or safety, nor be contrary to the intent or purposes of this ordinance. I would like to speak a little bit more to this with regard to some of the comments around the navigability, and I apologize, this is similar image, but this one's maybe a little bigger. So I will say that the BZA must be confident that the extended dock structures will not cause substantial harm or detriment to the adjacent or nearby lands or boats or the public interest or safety. In these regards, setbacks are critical to look at. So I have what's in the packet here is a little bit hard to see, or maybe a lot hard to see, but what it is essentially a scaled view or kind of a rubber sheet of the submitted site plan, the latest version of the submitted site plan dated January 6th, that shows the, I apologize, that may be the previous version of the site plan, but the dimensions did not change. So this site plan showed the proximity to the adjacent uses to the west and east. You have, first of all, a situation where it's maintaining a 12-foot side setback, where a 10-foot side setback is required, which actually improves upon the condition of the previous docks, which had, it's not exactly measured out on a plan that I've seen, but between 0 and 5 feet. So it does improve that side setback and maintains a side setback distance from the adjacent boathouse to the east, launch to the west of 75 feet roughly, and 162 feet roughly, respectively. So it does maintain sufficient side setback distance. And as mentioned, there appear to be roughly 82, give or take, feet from the shoreline to the shoreline at this location. With the furthest extent of these docks, you're looking at roughly 762 feet to the shoreline across the lake. The materials and aesthetics of the dock should also be considered, and these would be subject to review by the Planning Commission and BZA to be consistent and acceptable with surrounding properties docks. I would like to speak to the unusual circumstances or conditions involved, and I'll just put the image of the plan back on the screen, but there is a map in my report that kind of highlights the relatively few number of parcels that have direct access to Belleville Lake that I'll refer to. But generally, there are Just under 700 parcels, that abut Belleville Lake. There are many more parcels of land, elsewhere in the township. I will say, and this is a clarification from my previous report, the site serves an opportunity for lake access to some people, of course, members, primarily and guests of members, but some people who reside at properties without lake access, in addition to others who reside at properties with lake access. It also provides a distinct educational and recreational amenity to its members, which is distinct from that of other marinas or multi-docking facilities in the township. And it is also unique within a broader context of land use within the township. The upland parcel in this location being with one of a small amount of parcels that would fit into what's considered that ELB zoning category, having a either non-single family residential use or non-residential zoning, and that kind of provides some uniqueness to the property itself. The last criterion I will touch upon is that the special exception is consistent with the goal of providing reasonable, equitable access to all abutting lake owners. It should be considered that there's a near and long-term impact of increasing boating traffic potentially, and the proximity between higher intensity lakeshore uses such as marinas and multi-docking facilities and lesser intensity and passive facilities enjoyed by single family home sites. These would all be considerations of the planning commission's special approval for the marina use, which would be reviewed tomorrow night when that comes up before the planning commission. I have included some materials in the packet that are also provided for that review. But I do note that there are several sites in the township that would be considered marinas or multi-docking facilities. The site is roughly 1.4 miles from the most significant conventional marina, which is Sandy's Marina. And I've also provided some reference communities for comparison, just some maps with exhibits showing the relative close proximity of different marinas and docking facilities in those municipalities. And the reason for doing that is just to provide some context to have you evaluate whether you think that this site is reasonably located, situated, and is scaled appropriately to still provide this extension of dockage, but also to respect and maintain distances of other docking sites, and to show kind of the relative dispersal of those sites throughout the lake as a matter of looking at the equitable access to all lake owners. The proliferation of these types of sites would appear to be rare. There's rare, low potential for this in the future based on a relatively high number of sites that are currently built out as single family dwellings that would not be able to pursue this marina use, for example, or a multi-docking facility use. And there are very few sites that provide this type of service, or really no sites that provide this type of service with this type of constraint on the frontage of the parcel to provide this dockage. As mentioned by one of the comments earlier, there's a requirement in accordance with section 3.120 F7D of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance, and it's part and parcel with any exception that granting a specific special exception does not set a precedent for consideration of future special exception requests, as each request is to be decided on a case-by-case basis. Based on positive findings of those 5 criteria, I do recommend BZA to consider granting the requested special exception. And to do so, they will need to conclude that there are positive findings for these criteria as well. So I've included a model motion site sheet for the BZA to use. As part of my recommendation for approval, I do recommend that several conditions be enforced, which include that the proposed dock structures in the marina are subject to any necessary review and approval of this application by Eagle, or State of Michigan, and FERC. That the extended dock structures and marina use shall not include fueling activities as indicated, and that the use of the land must otherwise comply with Article 6, Chapter 42 of the Van Buren Township Code of Ordinances, which pertains to Belleville Lake and township-owned property.
I have included a model motion with the request. I'm available to answer any questions, to the best of my ability. And I know we do have the applicant here to present their request as well tonight.
Mr. Jones, are you the presenter for developing yacht club?
Is there a way I can turn this on, Dan? I do, sorry. Yes. Go to overhead, that should do it. I forgot about that. I'm sorry. I don't know. Can I zoom in? You can zoom in. It is upside down. Are you able to work it upside down? And your toes a little. There you go. So, okay. Okay, I want to thank the board for considering our exception. Just wanted to share with you a little bit of the process, how we got here tonight. So we acquired the property in 2012. It was a former Moose, which relied on floating docks for access to their property. We had upgraded those docks in 2015. We had a proposed site in the city of Belleville where we were going to build our facility. We moved those docks down to this site. So we operated with those floating docks up until 2020. We then started to replace the floating docks with pilings, and that's when the concern came from Van Buren Township in regard to us not having a permit to do that. So we ceased production under stop work order. We then went through several court cases or hearings regarding the docks, and the judge put it back into, I'd say, both of our laps, saying that, you know, you need to try to come to a resolution on how you can resolve this. We then applied for a marina permit. So in February of 21 was our first court hearings. In May of 21, we applied for an Eagle permit for a marina. The Eagle has basically put us back to Van Buren Township, saying they'd like that to be reviewed by Van Buren Township first, and then provide a letter to them accepting that, and then taking that back for our Eagle permit. So we're still in the permit process, kind of pending that approval here at a township level. Sorry. There's a target here just to show you. This is 121 feet off the property. We're proposing 120 feet maximum, and that's the distance to the outer shore. So our goal with Eagle was to get approval for docks. They did not like the T docks that we currently had as floating docks, because they felt to come in or exit the outer docks, you had to use your neighbor's property. So they felt we were crossing our neighbor's lot lines, and we were. You couldn't pull into the outer docks without crossing the neighbor's lot line. So they asked us to go to this type of configuration. So this is based on Eagle's recommendation. They prefer a longer pier dock with that keeps the boating traffic on the perpendicular docks to the property, interior to our property lines. So that's how this developed proposal came about and was resubmitted then to Van Buren. So tonight we're asking for the exception to allow us to take it to the next step with Eagle. We don't know if we'll have to have FERC's approval yet or not. It could, and if we have to get that, obviously we would. So we're in process at Eagle. We're before you tonight to try to resolve the issue through an exception that would allow us to go 120 feet out. We had 24 docks previously. Our goal with this proposal will get us 22. Dan mentioned 16, so we'll have 16 interior, and we have 6 boats that could parallel park on the outer within that 12 foot. So that's kind of the path to tonight and why we're here. So we, again, thank you for your consideration, and thanks for presenting it, Director Powers.
Any discussion about a panel?
Yeah, through the chair, I got a couple procedural questions. And this is directed more at video. So what's the difference between a variance and exception? Is that basically just the language?
variance is an authority given to the zoning board of appeals, and variance is something that runs with the land in perpetuity. Once a variance is granted, doesn't matter how many owners it goes through, the variance will stay with the land itself. Whereas an exception is something that you're granting to the use specific. It's technically not defined as a power under the zoning board of appeals as set forth in the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, but it's something our zoning ordinance allows us to do. Our zoning ordinance says if we have a question of how to modify a certain requirement, this can go before the zoning board of appeals. So it's something that is provided for in our zoning ordinance rather than dictated by state law.
So, and then just to follow on, does this create a precedence then for other areas on the left by granting this one?
When we say precedent, we are talking about being able to recreate, while one of the gentlemen in the previous case said, like every variance is reviewed on its individual merit. That is very true. However, if the case does not have enough merit, merely saying this case does not set a precedent means nothing. So we say precedent, that means can this be replicated anywhere else on the lake? So you're looking, is there any other place where there would be a capacity to have a yacht club? You're trying to recreate the use per se, all by itself. Do we have, as Director Power said, the lake is almost entirely built out at this time. Most of them are single family homes. We have Sandy's Marina across the lake, and then we have the Belleville Yacht Club. I'm not very familiar with all of the shoreline that is owned by the township, but based on what Director Power stated, I don't think there is another property where you could accommodate a use like this. So any exception that you're granting here would be just that, an exception for this particular property, not necessarily something that could be replicated or precedent setting.
Thank you.
That being explained, it takes a lot of the questions that being explained, it takes a lot of questions that I had in my mind, because when you were talking about Sandy Marina, and you're talking about BYC, it's like night and day.
They're different uses.
Sandy Marina's in a corner. It's away from everything. People don't gotta go skiing by and up and back. They gotta be at the end of the road, and they gotta go the other way. But BYC is in the middle of the lake. Okay, so that comparison doesn't have anything to do with anything. But with your explanation, I understand what you were saying, and being that this is a unique situation, exceptional, then I understand that. Thank you.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Question for Mr. Jones.
Yes,
So
sir.
did you say you can dock 24 boats and then the new setup will be 22?
We, through the process of negotiating during the court case, we removed the T-docks. So we currently have this, I'll call it an LDOC configuration. So today we cannot. And we also had started driving pilings and tore out 2 of our other floating docks. So today we could not. Today we have 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 docks.
14 going to 22.
Yes.
Okay. And then the purpose for that is obvious club growth.
Well, we previously did have the 24 prior to starting the conversion from floating to the pilings. And yeah, we have grown the club. We're currently at 300 members, but we also have 700-800 people on property usually for the fireworks show. We run our boater safety courses every year. We do a polar plunge every February for Special Olympics. We raise over 40,000, another 700 person property day. So the public's in the club quite often. And then many of our members don't have access to the lake. So they're not living on the lake. They may live, elsewhere in Van Buren or even other communities. And it allows them overnight docking. We exclude if you live on the lake using the docks overnight or over the weekend. If you do not live on the lake, it allows them access to the lake, and to the club.
Thank you.
It was, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Just clarification that
Yes.
you do allow overnight docking, home portaging of the boats at the marina.
We do. They have to get it pre-approved, and it would be only if they do not live on the lake, if they have nowhere else to park it. We do
I'm
not rent.
Sleeping overnight, staying overnight.
No sleeping on the boats. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna clarify that. There's a
Yeah.
difference between parking and
Yeah, and it was mentioned on fueling, and we're not a full service marina. No maintenance or no fueling is allowed on our docks.
You wanna go first, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the significant concerns that I have about this, and believe me, I believe that you guys need new docks, there's no question about it, but it's safety. Now, I've been seeing the aftermath of a number of boating accidents, it's really ugly. And to have a dock that's extended out 120 feet, and although on your picture there, it doesn't look like it's that much, but it could be considerable, right? So if indeed this exception is granted, I would request that there's adequate lighting on the docks.
I understand. I will say too, if you look at the extension of the marina, we're about 50 feet further out than the point of the marina dock. So if you're coming around that corner, you'd have to make a pretty tight turn to get into the first 50 feet of the docks. The second 50 feet, I agree, is substantially out there.
I would like to echo that. My big concern is the safety of the rest of the boaters. If you're skiing down that narrow slope, which I have done, and I'm sure other board members have done that. You're not straight behind the boat at all times, but it's ski boats. And they swerve, and I don't want anybody to be hitting your docks, extending 120 feet out into the water without some safety precaution that would stop that. And the other concern for that is sun up, sunrise, and sundown. When the sun reflects off the lake, which it does north to east or east to west, and you can't see. In my previous life, we used my pontoon for recoveries on the lake. I know firsthand what happens and how it happens. Accidents happen, but I don't want to be anybody hurt or killed, worst scenario. So I would like some safety measures. Lighting would be one, but it doesn't help much during the daylight hours with the bright sun reflecting off the lake. Do you have any suggestions of how we can get beyond that point? Well, I can get beyond, I'm speaking for myself right now.
Yeah, the lighting is an obvious one, and we would be more than willing to light up the docks. I think many of our members have brought up the same thing just for use of the docks, just walking on them, everything. It's much better to have a lighted walkway. So that one's easy. We can research what are better methods during sun up and sundown, where the lighting may not be effective, maybe reflective or some method
Light is
to
effective
catch your eye.
in the dark.
Yeah.
During the nighttime hours.
But so absolutely, we would not be opposed to any of those. And obviously, we don't want to hurt boaters. That's our whole mission is about.
Still a concern.
Absolutely.
Safety.
I understand.
Besides, the aqua.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes.
Current length of the dock right now for truth, how far away from the shoreline?
The most we were out previously was 84 feet.
Additional roughly 40 feet.
Yes.
Yes, Mr.
Jones,
Jones.
I'd ask the applicant, the current docks are kind of in a state of. Not just repair, there's half assembled, right?
You can see them on this picture, and the pilings are not showing. There's actually pilings already driven.
We're out of the pilings.
Today they're 84 feet out there. I understand the concern that was brought up earlier. We have not, we had a stop work order, so we stopped on that side. We removed the docks on the west side. So it is kind of in flux right now, and that condition will improve with this project.
Mr. Chair, I have just a comment that I would make. I think it's okay for the applicant to sit up there in case there are more questions.
Yeah.
One of the concerns that I have with this project is that it is coming in front of the zoning board of appeals without having been denied anything, as far as I know. It hasn't come through the planning commission. We haven't had the special use review. There hasn't been the public hearing for the special use. I don't feel that we're doing the applicant justice by trying to decide this today before he has had a chance to give his full presentation in front of the other governing bodies that would have a hand in determining or have all the information available. Mr. Jones mentioned there was a court case that was not in packet. I was unaware that there was a court case. And I don't know what the terms of that settlement are. They're not in here. I really feel like there's some information that's still out there. I will reiterate your concerns regarding safety on the docks and causes concerns. I've lived on the lake for a long time. I've had a boating license longer than I've had a driver's permit. Yeah, yeah, and I agree that the yacht club needs to get the docks fixed. And I feel like the docks you used to have seem like they were reasonable. I think my personal opinion, the piling that's out there right now is pretty far out there. I think it's a hazard. 120 feet, I think, is simply too far. It's, even if you light it, you still get the sun, you still get the glare. It's 3 times further out into the channel than any other structure on the lake. Other than Sandy's Marina, which doesn't actually, it's in kind of a cove. It's hard to tell it goes out that far unless you actually go there and walk around, but it does. And I am concerned about that. And I'm not sure that lighting alone would do it. My concern is one that was echoed by, I'm sorry, I don't remember who might have been called, Mr. Gibson or Mr. Perry during the public comment section, that there's concern about, well, what would the necessary safety measure be if you had a 120-foot dock? The necessary safety measure would be instead of slow no wake buoys 100 feet off the end of the dock. And then that's the necessary safety measure. And that if the dock is that long, well, that's the safety measure you have to have, but that seems like quite a lot of protrusion out into the lake. And I'm very concerned with it on a health and safety standpoint. I would also add that I don't think that holding you to the 40-foot standard is necessarily fair and just. You had legal non-conforming docks before what date was it, 2020?
Yeah.
You had legal non-conforming docks before 2020. You had 24 spots. They weren't out 84 feet, but I don't remember those docks ever being a problem at that length. 120 feet, though, that's significantly farther, and I would have a very big concern on that. I don't think you've had a chance to give us your usage presentation, because in planning commission, we would then be able to review the use criteria, and I don't think you've had a chance to present that to the public, because your public hearing for that is tomorrow. And to ask the BZA to make a decision that could affect your ability to install the docks I feel like we need more information, and that perhaps postponing any decision might be a reasonable course of action if that was what this board felt. With regard to Director Powers' assessment of similar docking facilities in Van Buren Township and in Lake Orion, and Ipsy, and Pine Lake, the distance is, obviously, as people have said, the yacht club is in the middle of the lake. It isn't a high traffic area. That could be a problem if the dock is too long. I do want to point out that I did consider all of the information that Director Power gave with regard to these marinas. I looked them up, and I will say I'm not a surveyor. I didn't go out with a sextant to measure the distance with a laser line. Sometimes in planning we expect you to do that. I haven't done that. But I will say that the longest dock on Belleville Lake is probably 110 feet, Sandy Marina. The second longest one is 100 feet. That's at the University of Michigan Rowing Club, there's some question as to whether or not that dock is in more than 3 feet of water. Maybe some of the other boaters in the room would be able to say whether or not that dock that's next to the sandbar and the park is in shallow water. The point is that the longest dock is 110. In Ypsilanti Township, the other marinas, one's 30 feet. All the other docks are less than 20 feet. At Lake Orion, there is a 110-foot long dock in Lake Orion, but it's completely enclosed in a man-made harbor. I'm not recommending we build a man-made harbor for you. That seems like that's not good for anyone. But all of the other docks, there's one 40-foot dock in Lake Orion, and all the rest are less than 22 feet. In Pine Lake's interesting. Pine Lake has a 177-foot long dock on the lake. But it should also be noted that Pine Lake isn't much like that, though. Like Pine Lake is what they call a kettle spring-fed lake. It's a funny lake. It's got one spot of it is 90 feet deep, but the mean depth of that lake is only 18 feet deep. And most of those docks need to go out longer than 100 feet in order to get into 5 feet of water. They're long because the lake is very shallow. I guess what I'm trying to say is that from a length standpoint, it seems that of the marinas that were included in the staff packet, there really aren't any that are going out 120 feet. And I would just want to point out that perhaps it's a unique situation, but that's a lot of marinas that don't require 120 feet of dockage going straight out into the water. Other than that, my concerns are with safety. I'm looking really forward to hearing about the use case and the use permit at the planning commission meeting and talk about the site plan tomorrow. That is what I have to say this evening. Thank you, sir. I'm sorry. I know that was long. I know that was long-winded.
Anybody else with any comments? Trustee Martin?
Mr. Jones, you say your pilings go out to 84 feet now?
Yes,
If you were to construct the dock at that distance, how many boats would you be allowed?
it would be one tier less, so it would be 3 versus 4.
So that, how many, that'd be 8 less boats?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. How many less? 2, 4, 6, 8, or I'm sorry, 2, 4, maybe 6 less. Yep. Put us at 16.
Through the chair. And that's through the new construction that was recommended, right? Versus your previous construction.
Yes.
And the reason they didn't want you to do the previous construction is because you're invading on the property.
Yeah, the concern with the T-Docs was that entering and exiting, and that's an Eagle concern. I haven't heard, that wasn't brought up by the township that I'm aware of. That came from Eagle with our preliminary meetings with them.
If we were to, I guess, look at that and say, for instance, if we voted and approved that, would Eagle approve that?
I don't believe the 120 feet, I can't speak for them, obviously. They've never brought the 120 feet up as a concern.
I'm sorry, I was talking about the previous.
Oh, the previous configuration?
Correct.
Yeah, I believe they would not approve that.
They would not.
They want us to only access our docks on our property lines. That was their major concern.
Thank you.
I figured since we have a planning commission, and here, along with a few other people, that he's given us information that we probably should take in and use for our benefit. And what I would propose is probably giving them an opportunity to get their version of it and then come back and we can make our decision. That's my proposal.
Sure.
Yes.
I agree with Mr. Jar. I think that they need to go through the planning process first, because this is usually, you come to this board when you've been denied an action. You've been denied, whatever you were seeking through the planning stage of this, and I think that we're kind of premature to be here right now, and I think Mr. Jones, it'd probably be in the best interest that you would do this before you make a decision. Because once we make a decision, it's final. So whatever happens after that is not.
Understood. Okay.
Anybody else?
Through the chair.
Yes.
I have another question to Vidya. Now, as far as procedurally go, is it correct to go to the planning commission first on something like this? Because it's an exception and not variation?
That is a tricky question. I think that the power has an answer to that already.
Yes, so thank you. If I may, through the chair, we did ask this question of our township attorney because it is structured differently in our ordinance. It's not an ordinance requirement that there's planning commission comment or feedback prior to the BZA acting on an exception for a conventional issue on the lake application. So technically that process is not required. It's understood that that may be helpful to make a more informed decision, but that is not a requirement of the ordinance for exceptions and about lake properties. Mr. Chair, for me, just to respond to one other point, just in terms of kind of summarizing the overall background of this case, to be sure, there was, I think what Mr. Jones referred to as court cases, there was an ordinance enforcement resulting in a ticket that went to court over the original construction. The adjournment of that ticket was based on the understanding that the applicant would be working with the township on a valid path toward an alternate approach toward approval. And I will also just go a little further to mention that originally staff was reviewing that closely and looking at what's the most viable and valid way to propose something like this for a site that's unique like this. The discussion of possibly looking at ordinance adjustments or ordinance amendments was reviewed. That resulted in a finding that this was by staff and people who were looking at that. And we had some input from some people who were had been involved with the lake committee in the ordinance development. The issue at this site was more specific to it's a unique site with some specific constraints. So just to tie that back to why we're here tonight, looking at this as an exception, there was kind of a finding by staff and looking at this that it was a uniquely constrained site or a unique position within the township where a general ordinance may not be as viable as looking at an exception to this particular site. So that's kind of why we're here tonight. And certainly there is background on the court case with the ticket that we can provide. But it's really just that's the means to getting here now, which is in any case, they're looking to establish a new set of docs regardless of what the genesis of the review is. So just want to clarify that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, sorry.
My question is, does the court retain jurisdiction over this case?
The court, I will get a firm answer on that from our township attorney, but that is.
Does it go back to court if whatever we do here, do you go back?
Okay, my understanding of it, and I have the case with me, but it was that if we couldn't come to resolution, then the ticket could be reissued by the township to go back before the judge. So I think what would initiate that is a new ticket. I think the current ticket is void. And now we're in the process that the judge requested that we try to come to a resolution. We started that process with Eagle. We now are at Van Buren Township to take it back to Eagle. And if Van Buren was unhappy with the resolution, they could reissue a ticket and we'd be back at the judge. But the judge never decided on what to do. Other than said, try to resolve this.
Between retaining jurisdiction over the case.
I don't believe I think you have control in that you could reissue a ticket to take it back to before a judge.
Okay.
There's not currently any plan to do that immediately. The applicant is working through the process, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Through the chair.
Yes.
My question is, Mr. Power, so what are they going to the planning commission for tomorrow? What is the purpose of that?
The case tonight is specific to the dimensional extension of the docks. The purpose of going to the planning commission tomorrow night is to establish a new use that is classified as a marina under the township lake ordinance. So it's to establish and get site plan approval, potentially a special use approval recommendation to the township board for the marina itself.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a follow-on question to that. Would the planning commission have jurisdiction over the dimensions, or is that specifically for the BZA to decide?
There is a ability that the planning commission would have to recommend, conceptually or fully recommend a site plan based on a condition that if there is an exception that needs to be granted, it gets granted by the BZA before the construction of the project. So they could review it and make recommendations based on the dimensions that are submitted and make conditions around that. If the dimensions that end up on that final version of the site plan are beyond 40 feet, they can have a condition that says this has to go to the BZA. That is a possibility.
Okay, and then just one follow-on question to Mr. Jones. You made reference to some dimension as far as how far the dock was sitting out from one direction. Could you re-explain that?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to bring it up here. That's okay. So this point off of the docks, if you see where that intersects our current dock, those first two legs are 24 feet each. So you're 24 plus 4, 24 plus 4. So that is the intersection line roughly of the current end of docks at the launch. So I was just saying that first area is pretty well protected. A boat would have to come very close to their docks to interfere with the first, call it 55, 60 feet of our docks.
And what's the perspective from the other direction?
So the traffic pattern is counterclockwise on the lake, or that's the requirement. Some people obviously don't follow that, but yeah, it curves in then hard the other way coming from the other side. Sorry, can you see that? The lake gets much wider at that point.
Valid point on the traffic direction. That's the concern is from.
If somebody went clockwise, understood.
Through the chair.
Yes.
It was also just asked, what was the original docks? Did they just start to deteriorate? What's the reason for?
So that, I'm glad you asked that because it was brought up. We're in a very rough spot, wave wise, because I think, it's a major acceleration, deceleration point from the launch. So when a boat's going from idle to on plane is when it makes its largest wake. That happens continuously with boats going in and out of the launch, either stopping to pull out or launching to take off. And so we literally had 1/4-inch plates reinforcing our corners. We snap them. We constantly break the existing floating docks because the amount of wave action in there. And, we made custom plates. We've wore through Schedule 40 1/4-inch pipe, quickly in one season. It's just, there's a ton of constant wave action at our location. I believe mostly driven by the launch because the boats are going in, they're jumping on plane. They create a lot of waves right in that area.
So the new configuration,
Yeah, the pilings prevent that from happening because we're subject to the floating up and down with the floating docks, where the pilings absorb all that into the pipe itself and they don't transfer it to the surface.
Okay, any other comments? Seeing none, what's your pleasure?
Through the chair, I'm sorry. Okay. Excuse me. So, Mr. Jones, are you willing to proceed with this today, or do you want to come back with more information, or what do you want to do before we?
I guess I'd like to ask a question. I think the concern we're trying to understand is the distance. And so if the 120 feet is, not doable tonight, if we go to planning and then came back with less distance, or does that a change? I heard, previously twice that when you vote, it's done. Does it mean you can't alter the proposal and bring it back before you again?
Director Power, I think, has the answer to that question. Do you not? So the case was written to be an extension up to 120 feet based on their specific request. And so the BZA could, I'm not sure if this is exactly what's being asked, but the BZA could postpone their action on their request to allow the planning commission review process to result in either that request or something lesser, and then whatever that result is to come back as within the same framework and the same case.
To be on the safe side, I would recommend postponing before the final decision on this board. So it's up to the pleasure of the board.
It's up to the pleasure of the applicant.
Okay,
Sounds like good advice. We'll postpone. We'll go to planning commission then and we'll come back before the board, if that makes sense.
Just as a clarification
Yes.
for the vote, since this has already been notified up to a 120-foot length, you do not need to re-advertise the public hearing notice. It's not required, you have held an official public hearing. So when it comes back before this body, you can grant anything up to 120 feet
Without a public hearing, I'm sorry.
without having up to the public hearing or re-notice. You can go 120 and below to any level. You can grant a lesser variant, lesser deviation than requested, but not greater than what's requested.
that's good for the audience to know as well.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I'd like to ask Mr. Jones, have you guys considered making it maybe shorter, 100 feet, or it's, I mean, I just want to know if this is something that you talked about as a group or.
We have, I mean, we've looked at a lot of options over the years, obviously. I don't think 22 docks is excessive for the membership we have, and we are built around boating. We call ourselves a yacht club, maybe a pontoon club. That's what we do. We boat, we access the lake, we do that. Our mission is built around Belleville Lake, and so I think 22 is a reasonable number. I understand the constraints of the property, and again, we appreciate the consideration, but we don't feel like we're asking for 150 docks either. It's 22. It's less than 10% of our members could be parked there at any given time.
Chair, also, I like to, for you to work on the safety issues and come up with something, a concrete, more safety plan. As far as lights, yeah, that's good at nighttime, but what do we do in the daytime to make sure it's safe?
So, yeah, very valid, and we should have thought of that and didn't, so we will.
If I remember, I think you said something about, someone said something about reflectors, because they work very well in the sun, if you don't get to drive here.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so I guess from our side, that would be the request. We table it with the public hearing being heard, go to planning commission, and then we'll get back on your agenda if that's agreeable.
addressing our comments.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Like to make a motion?
Yes, Mr. Thomas.
So I'd like to make a motion that we table case 22-56 until the planning commission gets an opportunity to review the case.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, the procedure, I don't think you can table it, that when you table it, you have to have a specific time that you revisit it, it will be a postponed.
Thank you. So I would like to amend my motion that we postpone case 22-056 until the planning commission has an opportunity to review the case.
Second. There's some support by Amy Critters and motion made by Mr. Hahn. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none? Yes, go ahead.
There were some stipulations here that we'd like to keep in place as well.
Yeah, the first statements and the permits, et cetera, is that what you're talking about?
I'm talking about the addition. I recommend conditions approved. Right here.
The plan, the staff letter, okay. It's section under the recommendation. Those recommendations to be.
Since the promotion to postpone, you really cannot attend any conditions to it or any aspect of the review letter. All you're doing is saying you'll consider this as
All right. So there's no amendment. All right, any further discussion on the motion? We better do a roll call vote, please.
John Herman,
Yes.
Amos Grissett,
Yes.
trustee Kevin Martin,
Yes.
John Haas,
Yes.
Jennifer Jar,
Yes.
Aaron Fellers.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carried. Thank
Thank-
you for
Thank you again for your time.
your presentation and come back soon. Thank you. Folks, we still have a meeting to continue, so. And the next item on the agenda is announcements, comments, and open discussion. I have a couple things that need to be discussed. One of them being the training sessions. There's some training opportunities coming up for the board. We need to have a motion to approve the calendar of events for our meeting dates. The township on their website has them posted, but we don't have them listed in our packets today. We can discuss it and approve them if you'd like. They continue to be the second Tuesday of the month.
That's correct. I knew I forgot, probably forgot several things, but that was one thing I forgot right before the meeting was to print you, the agenda,
Yeah.
schedule, so I will.
And then
Second, yes.
if anybody wants to change the time, the starting time, everybody else is at the earlier date, time of the day. I'm good with 7 o'clock, but the planning meeting's at 5:30, they meet at 6, so if there's a taste for earlier, for entertainment to, listen to you.
I like it the way it is primarily because it's going to be getting lighter soon. It's gonna be daylight at 7 o'clock. Not there right now, but it'll be there soon.
Okay, so no changes in the time? Okay, I'm fine with that.
Mr. Chair? Yes, I have a question, Mr. Power. Are the BZA members, members of the Michigan Association of Planning?
We tried to sign up, everybody who's coming on board, we'll make sure we continue to let people know about training opportunities through MAP, and when we do that, when we sign people up, we make them members. I think almost everybody is at this point.
Mr. Chairperson.
Yes,
Last year, the MAP Spring Training Institute, I was the instructor for the zoning board
I
of
know.
appeals. This year, I will be conducting a course that says Beyond the Basics, Advanced Board of Zoning Appeals Training. And basically, we discuss court cases and workshops. So if anybody is interested in going beyond the fundamentals of CBA, I promise it will be very exciting.
Why are you looking at me?
Heard you did a good job.
My question is this, we can attend it going to you, or do we want it in-house and you come to us? Is that possible, or is it?
We can work on having a proposal for it.
Okay, all right,
That's
so we'll come to you.
Before you start it out tonight, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead. I have one more announcement, but go ahead.
Okay, we were still talking about the dates, so
Yes.
we're gonna get those to it, but next month, February the 14th lands on Tuesday. So if we're gonna be doing anything on Tuesday, we don't need to be doing it at 7 o'clock.
Well,
That's Valentine's.
That's, yeah,
the formal meeting schedule is 7 o'clock on the second Tuesdays. If the BZA, can come to a consensus on a time to convene when there's a ability to have quorum, and you'd like to look at another date, that is a possibility. If that's requested by an applicant, there's an additional charge to it. We have to coordinate with our planning consultant, but I believe we can look at that. I think many people would.
Should we talk about it right now?
Yeah, it's a good point to bring that up during that. Looking at a special meeting or February. That's what we want to do.
Is there any possibility we could change days for that 1 month?
I will check our bylaws and report back with an email to everybody tomorrow if there is a reason we can't, but I will assume that we can, otherwise I don't see any issue with holding up that request and.
And so we may want to coordinate soon regarding availability in February, on or near that date.
I have one more thing before I forget. Mr. Collin, would you please come to the front of the table here? Mr. Collin is going to be our, new representative for the planning commission. The alternate for the planning commission to the zoning board of appeals, and I want to make sure that you guys know who he is, and welcome him to, enjoy the time. He's following in his dad's footsteps.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, he is filling the role previously held by Commissioner Atchison.
Yes.
Who does remain on the planning commissioner and the role of secretary, I believe, correct? Formally, she's the third officer.
I think that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Cullen says.
Okay. All right, any other items for discussion?
We haven't decided about what's going to happen in February. Do we have anything for February?
It may depend on, there's a possibility the case that you just reviewed may come back. I'm not aware of any other submittals that would be on that schedule at this time, but there's a possibility that Yakov's case could come back.
I mean, the lawyer will wanna do something soon, stay in the middle of everybody. I can't imagine what we drag it out for another 2 months or 2. I guess I think we're trying to come back soon.
Yes.
Can we discuss this right now, decide, because I've said everything around that time myself personally, not that I ever, but the day after I'm out of town. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
I'm certainly all right with moving the date.
Mondays are
Our bylaws. allow.
Mondays are out, your work study before.
Um,
No, that's correct.
So is Monday okay?
I don't know what's going on Mondays.
Anything next following Tuesday?
Or the following week.
First, I'm saying the following Tuesday.
What time?
You say he's gonna be out of town.
I'm out of town for 4 weeks.
Yeah, the third Tuesdays are board meeting dates, or trustees meeting
Yeah.
dates.
Yeah, we either have the second or the fourth Tuesdays. Available.
That's fine with me. Monday.
Monday's okay?
I don't think there's anything on Monday.
Yeah, Mondays or Thursdays may work.
I mean, we can have it on Valentine's Day, but we need to do it before 7 o'clock.
Any issue for the something?
Can I ask this, is everybody on the, at least comfortable, come to a consensus on this, if our bylaws allow it, adjusting the beginning date, just so we have this statement out there that we're gonna be looking into this and posting a new date, if that's a possibility.
Yes, I'm fine with that.
I'm okay either way. Chairman, I'm all right either way.
Yeah, I think I'm available too for now.
So think about perhaps the Thursday, the 16th or another date, Monday or Thursday near that date, and maybe we can come up with a couple of dates in an email, and then post. I'll also see if there's anything required through the board or through our bylaws that would address that, but I'll let you know soon. Can we tentatively say perhaps the 16th at 7? Thursday, 7.
No, Amy's not gonna be here, so.
After 7, after the 14th, you won't be.
No. Wednesday, I'm out of here. But I mean, I don't have to be here, but
Perhaps Monday the 13th.
Yeah.
Then Monday would work better. Third Thursday is typically a meeting scheduled for me around the time. That easy.
We'll look into Monday the 13th at 7 and we'll establish whether there's consensus on that.
One more announcement before I ask for a review. I want to acknowledge that our very own trustee Kevin Martin is a representative ex officio member of the Michigan Planner.
all right. All right.
I meant to bring that up at the last meeting and I forgot, so I brought 2 planners this there, so I know what to do.
Yeah, my name in there now.
Yes. That means we
Thank you,
have to go to
Commissioner.
class, doesn't it?
All right, any other business? Discussion, being none, motion to adjourn is in order. And it's not debatable. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Oh, we got a-